If you're still designing 4 different layouts for desktop, tablet, mobile landscape, and mobile portrait in Webflow, you're probably wasting a lot of time. In this video, I show you how we'll avoid most breakpoints using a fluid design system. We look at fluid typography, fluid spacing, fluid icons, auto grids, and also flex wrap, and how all of them help your layouts adapt naturally across every screen size. Let's jump in. Fluid typography should really be the standard in modern web design. There's simply no reason to maintain separate font sizes for desktop, tablet, and mobile anymore. Yet, that's exactly how many sites are still built. Take a look at this. Notice how the typography scales smoothly as I resize the browser. I never touch a breakpoint, yet every heading and every text style stays nicely balanced across the entire viewport. So, how does this work? Everything is driven by Webflow variables. Instead of assigning fixed values for every breakpoint, text styles point to fluid typography variables. These variables use CSS Clamp. If you never used CSS Clamp before, it's simply a CSS function that lets you define a minimum size, a preferred fluid size, and a maximum size. The browser automatically calculates the correct value based on the viewport width, so your typography grows and shrinks instead of jumping at breakpoints. Now, writing clamp values by hand isn't exactly fun, so we built a simple clamp scale calculator. Here I can set my preferred min and max viewport size, and then I choose a typography scale that fits my project. And the calculator automatically generates clamp values for the entire type system. And if I want more control, I can adjust any individual heading or text size manually. Maybe I want my H1 to scale differently. I can adjust and update these values and see the effect immediately. I can do this with any text style. Once I'm happy with the values, I simply copy the generated clamp expression and paste it directly into my Webflow variable. From that point on, every class and every component using that variable updates automatically across my entire project. So instead of maintaining 4 different font sizes for 4 different breakpoints, I define the typography once and let the browser do the rest. So here's another small detail that makes a surprisingly big difference. Notice how the icons also scale as I resize the browser. Large icons often look great on desktop, but on smaller screens they can quickly start taking up way too much space. By making them fluid, they stay balanced across every device and again without touching a single breakpoint. Let's see how this is built. Just like our typography, the icon sizes are powered by Webflow variables using CSS Clamp, except for the smallest sizes. We predefined a whole range of icon sizes, so in most projects you can simply pick the one that fits your design. Now, using those sizes is just as easy. Back in the designer, the icon component exposes every size as a variant. So instead of editing classes or changing custom CSS, I simply select the size I want directly from the props panel. Because every variant is connected to our fluid variables, the icon automatically scales across screen sizes. It's a small detail, but these are exactly the kinds of things that make responsive design feel really polished. Now, let's look at the foundation of every good layout: spacing. As I resize my browser, notice how the entire layout breathes naturally. The spacing between sections, around content, and in cards all scales smoothly with the viewport. Just to be clear, we're not talking about grid gaps here. We'll cover those separately in a moment. This is the core spacing system that everything else builds upon. Let's check out the variables. Here you find our sizes, and specifically here are space variables. There are quite a few of them, and that's intentional. Different parts of the website need different amounts of spacing. We use them for sections, components, padding, margin gaps, and so much more. Just like typography, every one of these values are powered by CSS Clamp. No breakpoints. This is really the modern way to work with spacing. On large desktop screens, you generally want generous white space, while on mobile, you need a much tighter layout to make better use of limited screen space. The nice thing is that we've already tuned these values to work for almost any project. In most cases, you won't need to change them at all. These variables also power a large part of the framework. For example, all the standard client-first spacing utilities, like padding and margin classes, are all connected to these variables in the Atom framework. The same goes for many of our element sizes. Heading spacing, button groups, tags, cards, and even our section spacing all reference this same system. So instead of managing spacing throughout your project, you maintain one central set of variables that keep everything consistent. Now let's build on that foundation. So far we looked at spacing around elements. Now let's look at the spacing between them. As I resize the browser, notice how the gaps inside these layouts also scale smoothly. The space between cards becomes slightly tighter on smaller screens, making much better use of available space. Most of the time gaps are used inside grids and flex layouts, so having them respond automatically saves a lot of breakpoint work. The framework comes with a complete set of fluid gap utilities, so in most cases you simply choose the size you need and you're done. Now here's something I really like. If you jump back into the variables, you notice that the gap utilities don't have their own clamp values. Instead, they're connected directly to our space variables. This means a class like gapSmall simply references spaceSmall. And because of that, changing the overall feel of the project is incredibly easy. Maybe this project needs a little bit more breathing room. Instead of updating dozens of grids and flex layouts, I can simply point gapSmall to spaceMedium instead if I want. With the single change, every layout uses that utility immediately becomes more spacious. Now, let's look at one of the biggest time savers in the framework, autogrids. This section is built with 2 autogrids. The autogrid breaks early, moving the title above the cards. The inner grid uses a smaller column size, so the cards stay side by side much longer, even on smaller screens. And again, all of this happens automatically. No breakpoint overrides, no media queries. So how does this work? Instead of defining a fixed number of columns, an autogrid simply defines how wide each column should be. The browser then automatically figures out how many columns fit on each screen size. Inside the autogrid component, you simply choose a column size variant. If you're not sure which one works best, just simply resize the browser or switch to mobile size viewport and try different variants. The important thing is that you're not creating a mobile version of the layout. You're simply adjusting the grid logic, and that logic applies everywhere. Autogrids are incredibly powerful, and there's so much more to them that we can cover here. We'll dedicate an entire video to mastering autogrids very soon, so make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss that one. Let's finish with one simple tip that can save you from creating even more breakpoints. Take a look at these logos. As I resize the browser, they automatically wrap onto the next row whenever there's not enough space. No media queries, no breakpoint overrides, just a flexible layout that adapts naturally. This works thanks to Flex Wrap. Whenever you're building with Flexbox, enabling Flex Wrap allows the browser to move items into a new row instead of trying to squeeze everything into one line. It's perfect for things like logo sections, button groups, tags, filters, features list, really any horizontal layout where the number of items can vary. In the Atom framework, our Flex Row component supports this out of the box. It lets me switch between left, center, right, spaced, and their wrapping versions with a single variant. It's a simple feature, but when you combine Flex Wrap with fluid typography, spacing, autogrids, you find yourself spending a lot less time working with breakpoints and a lot more time having fun designing and building. One last thing before you go. If you start using Fluid Design tomorrow, you notice the biggest improvement isn't on desktop or mobile. It's all the screen sizes in between. And that's where Fluid Design really shines. In our next video, we'll take a deep dive into autogrids. I'll show you exactly how they work, when to use them, and why they've almost completely replaced traditional breakpoint-based layouts in my workflow. So if you don't want to miss that, make sure to subscribe. And if you'd like to try everything we've seen in this video, you can clone the Atom Builder framework completely for free using the link in the description. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.